Well, welcome back to our study of 1 Corinthians. We are in chapter 7 and we're picking up with verse 5. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time so you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. Afterward, you should come together again so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control.
So there's a time that if you're fasting, and this is what he's talking about, a time you just want to give yourself to the Lord, then obviously that should be through discussion. You tell the partner, I'm not going to be having sex, or I'm not going to be eating because I'm going to give myself to the Lord. And then there should be that mutual agreement with that. But then when that's over, then you come back together. Okay? Don't create problems for yourself. Okay? You think about this in the Old Testament when God was going to appear to the nation, like He would tell Moses, "Now you tell the men not to come near their wives." Okay. In other words, I want you set apart for me. Okay. But then once they've had that meeting with God, well, then they go back to life as normal. You understand? And so really that's what he's dealing with here. Okay?
But I say this as a concession, not as a command.
That's the next verse, okay?
Mm-hmm. But I wish everyone were single, just as I am, yet each person has a special gift from God of one kind or another.
Now, this is not a commandment, it's what he's saying, okay? I wish that everybody was like me, single. Well, if everybody was like Paul, single, there wouldn't be any babies, right? But then note this, that he goes on to say, nevertheless, that everyone has his own personal gift, one after this manner, another after that. In other words, what he's saying is, I have a gift of celibacy, to where I don't, need a relationship with the opposite sex, and he's not homosexual. Don't even go there with me. Okay. But what he's saying is he's given himself totally to the Lord. Now you think about the ministry that Paul had. It'd take a special woman to handle a ministry like that. Your husband beaten all the time, in jail, going and gone. You know, God told Jeremiah, "Don't get married." Well, that's the exception to the rule. Why? Because Judah's going into captivity. Okay? And so this right here won't be good for you. You follow me? And so you have to be careful not to make doctrines out of these things. If the Lord has dealt with you a certain way and that's your gift, then you operate in that gift. But a person who does not have the gift of celibacy has a natural attraction to the opposite sex. You with me? And what will happen is Satan will use that against you and tempt you. You follow me? And so that's why he laid the groundwork. That's why you need to get married. Okay, so your sexual needs are met. Okay? But if you don't have that drive, then you're better off to stay single. Then you're not distracted from doing what God wants you to do. And I can tell you right now, I don't care who you are. If you're married, there is some distraction from God, because you got to take care of your mate. I didn't say you got to take care of your mate, okay? Now, so that's just that's the natural thing. So there's somewhat of a divided attention. You don't want to forget birthdays and stuff like that. You understand? God's not interested in all that stuff. But if you're going to live in peace, you need to be. Okay.
Man. So I say to those who aren't married and to widows, it's better to stay unmarried, just as I am.
Now, understand what he's saying is, if you're not married, or if you've been married and you're a widow, you're better off not to get married because you can give all your attention to the Lord. Okay? But if you get married, you didn't sin. Okay. Well, you might want to go
Yes,
on
sir.
reading there, okay?
But if they can't control themselves, they should go ahead and marry. It's better to marry than to burn with lust.
Okay, if you still have a sexual drive in you and you need a man or you need a woman, then it's better to marry than to be inflamed with passion, going around thinking about it all the time. You follow me? That's where he's coming from. And there's nothing wrong with sexual drive. Sex drive, God put it in people. And you know, most ministers don't want to talk about it, okay? I'm old enough now, it doesn't matter, all right? Okay. And so God put the drive in the man and the woman. It's not a sin for a woman to have sex drive, but some think it is. No, God put it there. That's why there's an incentive for babies, okay? If you had no desire, then we probably wouldn't have any babies in the earth, okay? And so God put that in. But those with the gift of celibacy have no sex drive. So they're not thinking about opposite sex and passionate and all this type thing. But the normal thing is you are thinking about opposite sex. There is a passion, and that's not a sin in and of itself. That's why you marry. And so he says you're better off if you can stay single. But if you're going to be distracted with passion, then go on and get married. Okay? Otherwise, it's going to occupy your mind. You'll think about it, dream about it, and all the other stuff. Okay? Right? Don't act so pious to me. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. I think we're at verse 10.
Yes, sir. But for those who are married, I have a command that comes not from me, but from the Lord.
Read 11 with it also.
Yes, sir. But a wife must not leave her husband, but if she does leave him, let her remain single, or else be reconciled to him, and the husband must not leave his wife.
Well, this is God's best. Now, before I say this, I want to preface it by saying you start where you are, and don't let this put you into condemnation. If you've been married, divorced, and remarried, then start where you are. You with me? But here's the way God's plan was when you're married, you stay married, and if there's a problem there, and the wife leaves her husband, then you remain unmarried or be reconciled to your husband. You with me? Don't leave him to go look for another man or vice versa. Okay? The man's not to leave the wife to go look for another woman. That's not the thing. If you have differences that where you're absolutely not compatible, and I'm not going to go into all the detail of that, but then if there is a separation, there is a divorce or whatever, then stay single. Okay? But here again, there are some exception clauses. Okay? And there's one sin that's unforgivable: blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Now, the church may not forgive you, but God does, okay? But this is telling you what's in your best interest. You with me? It's in your best interest to stay married to the person you originally married to and try to work out your, your problems. And honestly, most of them could be worked out through good communication, but too often, flesh gets involved and it's not communication, it's just argument and the battle line's drawn and you go your way, I'll go mine, and all that type of stuff. But it's better that you either stay apart, not get remarried, or be reconciled. That's the best. That's the best way. Okay? But don't think you're going to hell if you get married again after you're divorced, okay? That's not what he's saying.
Now I will speak to the rest of you. Though I do not have a direct command from the Lord, if a Christian man has a wife who is not a believer and she is willing to continue living with him, he must not leave her. And if a Christian woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to continue living with her, she must not leave him.
All right, think about it. You have a believer, unbeliever. All right, now let me preface this. First off, if you're a believer, you shouldn't marry an unbeliever. Maybe the Bible's very plain about that. Do not be unequally yoked. That's what it's talking about. Believer, unbeliever. Okay, and I can tell you, as a minister, I will not marry a sinner to a Christian. And I've had people to get extremely upset with me over that. But I'm going to live by my conscience, not yours. Okay? And when the Word of God says, don't be unequally yoked, then I'm not going to be a participant in it by unequally yoking you. Okay? But if you're married and one of you gets saved, the other doesn't want to get saved. One of you wants to serve God, the other doesn't want to serve God. But they're okay with you serving God. And they prefer for you to stay there, then go on with your marriage. But if they get upset and they decide they can't live in that environment and they leave, you're under no obligation. As much as is possible, live peaceably with all men. But there are some that's not possible. You follow me? Okay. And so a lot of people get into condemnation when they don't need to be into condemnation. If that heathen, unbeliever, if that heathen wants to remain a heathen, that's his prerogative, and you're not under obligation if he or she leaves. Let them go. Okay? But then don't go looking for somebody else, because you may get yourself right back in the same mess. You follow me? Now, let's go on and read the other before I get ahead of myself here.
For the Christian wife brings holiness to her marriage, and the Christian husband brings holiness to his marriage. Otherwise, your children would not be holy, but now they are holy.
So here's what happens is when you have a believer, then that believer is serving God, then that believer is bringing something into that household to set apart, which is going to have influence on the children. It's going to have influence on the husband. In other words, there's an element of holiness to this, of a sanctity to this. You with me? Okay, that's what he's dealing with there. It's not that you make the unbeliever holy, but there's an element of protection that person has by being in a holy house or with a holy mate. Do you follow me? It's the same way with the children. Otherwise, your children would just be subjected to ungodliness. But as it is, there's a person in the house, and then the mate's subjected to godliness, and the children are subjected to godliness. You see where he's coming from? Okay.
But if the husband or wife who isn't a believer insists on leaving, let them go. In such cases, the Christian husband or wife is no longer bound to the other, for God has called you to live in peace.
Now, we addressed this earlier, but that's pretty self-explanatory, right? You're not in bondage if a person leaves to where you walking the floors and trying to figure out, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I've dealt with this. This is why I'm saying it, okay? This is not hypothetical. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? The bottom line is, it's not that you may not have done anything wrong. The devil doesn't like to hang out with God. And so if that person is full of the devil, they don't want to hang out with God. That's the problem. And so if they want to leave and hang out with some ungodly person, then you're not under bondage. You understand? And I'm going to tell you, some of the legalistic churches are tearing people's lives up and keep them in emotional distress because they're making them feel guilty for something they didn't even do. You know, I have no control over another person's heart. They control that. You understand? And you can't chain them down and make them stay. That's not going to work, right? And so if their heart is gone, they're gone. There's a lot of people, they'll criticize divorce, but they have divorce by default because they have no real union. They're just living in the same house. You understand? They just appear to be married, but there's no marital relationships going on in the house. You follow me? Don't let people put you into condemnation. Listen to the Spirit of God. And God is not going to condemn you. If you're doing something wrong, then God will convince you you're doing something wrong. We call it conviction. And if there's something that you're convicted of, then take care of the problem. Get forgiveness, stop doing it, and go on with your life. Okay?
Thank you. Don't you wives realize that your husbands might be saved because of you? And don't you husbands realize that your wives might be saved because of you?
Now, you think about this, here again we're looking at a believer and unbeliever. Well, he doesn't want to get saved, so I'm going to leave. Well, you may have influence on him. Or he wants to stay here. You may have influence on him, or her. You may have influence on them, and you may win them to the Lord. Now, there's no guarantee. You with me? Because every individual has a will that God honors. But what you can have tremendous influence, godly influence, over a person's life. I'm thinking of one woman right now that she was married to a rascal. But I'll just tell you that right now. And years and years and years, she'd pray for him and pray for him and pray for him and pray for him. Not fuss at him and fuss at him and fuss at him and fuss at him. He'd pray for him. Before that guy died, he got saved. She had that kind of influence on his life. But there's no guarantee of that, and even in that case, it was many, many years. But she did have godly influence in the house. Do you see that? It's not that you just say, well, I'm going to get my husband saved or I'm going to get my wife saved. Well, that is if they want to get saved. You understand? Because salvation is personal between that individual and God. And just because a person says what you want them to say doesn't mean they got saved. And there's a whole lot of that stuff that goes on. You with me? I'm talking about heart change. Salvation brings about a heart change. Okay? But you may have influence, so don't jump ship. If he wants to go, you're not under bondage, or she, whatever the case may be. Okay?
Each of you should continue to live in whatever situation the Lord has placed you and remain as you were when God first called you. This is my rule for all the churches.
Here again, when did you get saved? What condition were you in? Then don't beat yourself up. And we'll get into this here in just a few verses. I'm about to jump ahead of myself. But in whatever state you're in, that's fine. You were both heathen. You got saved. He's still a heathen. Live for the Lord. Okay? You're a slave. You got saved. Don't worry about being a slave. Just keep serving the Lord. Let's go on and read that.
Okay.
I'm getting ahead of myself here.
For instance, a man who was circumcised before he became a believer should not try to reverse it. And a man who was uncircumcised when he became a believer should not be circumcised now. For it makes no difference whether or not a man has been circumcised. The important thing is to keep God's commandments.
Let me just deal with this, right?
Okay.
Obviously, Jews put great emphasis on circumcision, and they didn't think you could be accepted by God unless you were circumcised. Okay, Paul says when you got born again, were you circumcised? Then don't try to get uncircumcised. Were you uncircumcised? Then don't get circumcised. You're already born again. In other words, it's not what's going on in the flesh, but it's what's going on in the heart of that individual. So you just whatever, lot of life you had at that particular time, whatever state you were in, then go from there. Live from there. And then we'll go into the next verse where he...
Yes, each of you should remain as you were when God called you. Are you a slave? Don't let that worry you. But if you get a chance to be free, take it.
There you go.
Yeah. And
God saves slaves.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? God saves all kinds of people. Don't concern yourself with that. Just thank God that he loved you enough and gave you the opportunity to be born again, and then just live for God. If you're a slave, then you ought to be the best slave. You understand? And I bring this into employee and employer today. To me, a born-again employee should be the best employee on the job. He should be representing the Lord. You shouldn't have to be looking over his shoulder all the time to make sure he's doing this and doing that, and he shouldn't be doing sloppy work. He should be setting the pace. You understand? The employer should think, man, I'd like to have a lot of these Christians. But sadly, it's the other way around. Sometimes you find that the Christians are the sorriest workers. Mm. No, we're representing God. Whatever state you're in, represent God. If you're free, represent God. If you're a slave, represent God. If you own your business, represent God. If you work for somebody else, represent God. You understand? This is talking about representation. Don't let those things concern you. You just keep your relationship right with the Lord. Okay?
And remember, if you were a slave when the Lord called you, you are now free in the Lord. And if you were free when the Lord called you, you are now a slave of Christ.
You get that? Mm-hmm. Were you a slave and you got born again? Now you're free. When the Son says free is free. Were you a free man and you got born again? Well, now you're a slave of Jesus Christ. We'll see where he's coming from. Okay. We all have a master.
Mm-hmm. God paid a high price for you, so don't be enslaved by the world.
You're bought with a price. Now, understand what he's coming from. Or somebody take this verse and go off at the deep end and make a fool out of themselves, okay? We're bought with a price. Obviously, Jesus Christ has purchased us with his blood. And so we're now in the family of God. And so now we're servants of the Lord. Now, when he says you're not servants of men, religion. You with me? You're not serving religion. It doesn't say that you don't work for people. It doesn't say that you don't honor people. It doesn't say you don't give service to people. But you're serving God, not men. You follow me? And too many people are serving men and not God. They do what the denomination says. They do what the organization says. They do what the tradition says rather than what God says. Then you're serving men, not God. No, we're servants of God, not men. Okay?
Each of you, dear brothers and sisters, should remain as you were when God first called you.
Wherever you call, abide there. You understand? Don't get into condemnation over whatever your lot in life is, whatever your caste is. It doesn't matter if you're low caste, high caste. In God, everybody's equal. In Jesus, you understand? There's no male, no female, and no slave and no master. We're all equal in Jesus. So don't concern yourself with that. Just concern yourself with the Lord. I'm one with the Lord. And nobody is better than me in the Lord, and I'm no better than anyone else in the Lord. You with me? We're all on equal ground, okay, in the Lord. Now, that has nothing to do with positions of authority. That has to do with salvation. Okay?
Now, regarding your question about the young women who are not yet married, I do not have a command from the Lord for them. But the Lord in his mercy has given me wisdom that can be trusted, and I will share it with you. Because of the present crisis, I think it is best to remain as you are.
Now, here again, Paul's giving advice. He's not laying down some hard-clad doctrine that they have to live by. Are you a virgin? Well, in my opinion, basically, that's where he's coming from. He said, I have no commandment from the Lord concerning virgins, but I'm going to give my judgment. This is my observation. You understand where he's coming from? That's basically the way it's said. This is my observation, that because the things are the way they are right now, and I know I've obtained mercy from the Lord, then it's better off for a virgin not to get married because of the situation. Okay? Now he's not going to stop there. All right, we'll keep reading.
If you have a wife, do not seek to end the marriage. If you do not have a wife, do not seek to get married.
Okay. Are you loose from a wife? Then don't seek one. Are you married to one? Stay with her. Pretty basic. You know, here again, just the context of it. Whatever state you're in, live there. Okay? But here again, he's not bringing condemnation on anybody. He's just simply telling us that it's good for a person if they're not distracted with things of the world. And there's an element of things of the world in marriage, okay?
But if you do get married, it is not a sin. And if a young woman gets married, it is not a sin. However, those who get married at this time will have troubles, and I am trying to spare you these problems.
I don't like that young maiden, virgin. Okay, that's what the context is, virgin, okay? So, you're unmarried, you get married, you haven't sinned. If a virgin marries, she hasn't sinned. You follow me? But he says, I can tell you this, that if you get married, you're going to have trouble in the flesh. How many married people know that? Don't you lie to me. Everybody knows it. Because there's situations and circumstances that come up, and there's problems that you wouldn't have faced if you hadn't been married. You understand? Okay. I won't belabor it.
Okay. But let me say this, dear brothers and sisters. The time that remains is very short. So from now on, those with wives should not focus only on their marriage.
Now, here again, you have to understand how he's saying this. Don't let your wife pull your attention off of the Lord, or don't let your husband pull your attention off of the Lord. The time, you think about Paul writing this, he said, time's short. We don't need anything to distract us from the Lord. Don't let your spouse be a distraction from the Lord. That's not to say you abandon. It's to say that God's always the priority, okay? And so we have to be led by the Spirit of God, whether you married or unmarried. You follow me? Okay.
Those who weep or who rejoice or who buy things should not be absorbed by their weeping or their joy or their possessions.
Well, I don't even think I need to go any farther with that. I think it's sort of self-explanatory, okay?
Those who use the things of the world should not become attached to them, for this world as we know it will soon pass away.
You know, we're in the world, we're not of the world, but because we're in the world, there's things of the world we use, but we're not to overuse it. In other words, the things around us is a tool. Money's a tool. You understand? Working's a tool, a job's a tool, and I mean, you can go on and on and on. Use the things, but don't overuse the things to the point that those things are controlling you. Okay?
I want you to be free from the concerns of this life. An unmarried man can spend his time doing the Lord's work and thinking how to please Him.
Go ahead and read 33.
But a married man has to think about his earthly responsibilities and how to please his wife.
You understand? Paul is just simply laying out truth. And every one of us knows that he's telling the truth here. Okay? And so if a person is not married, they can give their undivided attention to the Lord. If a person is married, then they're going to have to give some attention to that spouse, right? So that their needs are met. You follow me? He didn't say that you're ungodly by doing that. That's not what he's saying at all. He's just telling you that you can give more attention to God if there's absolutely nothing distracting you. And chances are people get married, they're going to have kids, and now you've got more distractions. You follow me? But if you don't get married, you don't have kids, then you don't have distractions. It's just you and the Lord. And if the Lord says go, you can go. Anytime, anywhere. You follow me? Okay.
His interests are divided. In the same way, a woman who is no longer married or has never been married can be devoted to the Lord and holy in body and in spirit. But a married woman has to think about her earthly responsibilities and how to please her husband.
See, this is what he's saying to the virgin. Listen, right now, you give your attention to the Lord. If you get married, you're going to have to give a part of your attention to your husband. Okay? Now, it's not that she sins if she gets married. And so don't read that into it. He's telling you what's in your best interest as far as personal, intimate, unhindered relationship with the Lord and fellowship with the Lord. If you're a virgin, it's you and the Lord. But if you get married, then there's a husband involved in all that, or a wife, if you're male. You see all that? Okay. Understand, when you read the 7th chapter of 1 Corinthians, understand what Paul is saying. This is in your spiritual best interest. This is in your spiritual best interest. To where you can this is the way you can become the most intimate with the Lord, is through these instructions I'm giving. Okay? We'll stop there and we'll pick back up with this in our next session, okay?
Father, I thank you that you bless us indeed. You enlarge our territory. Your hand's with us to keep us from evil so that we do not cause pain. And I thank you for blessing us and keeping us and for making your face to shine upon us and being gracious unto us. You lift up your countenance upon us and